Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Brian Liceaga joins us today. He is the SVP of Cybersecurity for Qubika. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Very happy to be here.
So how did I do? Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, you
Ah, awesome, awesome,
we were
awesome.
practicing a lot backstage, but you nailed it.
Well, Brian, thank you so much again for joining us this morning. We'd love to hear your story starting from the beginning, and I'll just give everybody a little bit of a preview, something a little bit different here. I often get folks on here that have started their own businesses, but not folks that have sold their own business. So we're going to chat about that for just a couple of moments. But tell us your story, Brian.
Well, yeah. So as of May 1st, my company, Security, was acquired by Qubika. So they are a leading tech consultancy with a strong focus on data and AI. And a bit about that background, we've been partnering together for a number of years, and I fully had kind of realized and come to the realization that, like, look, AI is the future here, and it's going to drastically change how services, not only just consulting services, but how cybersecurity services are delivered. So when I wanted to make that shift into AI, I began looking at what kind of M&A opportunities were out there. But after speaking with a couple of people, it became very obvious that this partner that I was already working with had made this huge investment into AI. So working with Qubika was just a perfect match. And they're already so far along in their AI offerings, and I'm super excited to just tag on and adopt those accelerators and the platform that they're working on into the cybersecurity services.
So to talk just a little bit about how you found it, because you found it, it was Nitro Security, you said?
That's right. Yes.
Back in 2020, I think, is,
Yes.
if I'm reading this right here. What led you to start a company, and then what is it like to sell a company? I mean, I think about my firm, VCSO Services. I timed that perfectly for that image to come up right when I was going to say this.
That's
I think about, well, at some point in time, I'm going to have to figure out an exit, I guess, but this is my baby. I mean, I've been nurturing this for so many years, and the thought of like selling kind of bothers me a little bit sometimes. But so start out with founding the company. Why did you start the company?
Yeah, so if I take you all the way back, I initially was working for big corporate, learned a ton. It was an amazing experience back in Chicago. From there, I was still in school, so I was doing a master's degree program, and there was a course on entrepreneurship, and that just kind of like flipped the switch. And also, it's just in I think my family's blood. My father, siblings, grandfathers, they were all business owners. So like eventually, I had to fulfill my destiny, and I think do this, but I made the shift a bit more gradually, where I started out big corporate. After that, I moved to a very well-funded startup. I was the only cybersecurity, and I was the first cybersecurity hire that they had there. So I got to build the program from scratch, which was really cool. It's kind of like a Silicon Valley vibe, but in Chicago, cloud native company. That was a newer concept at the time. Tons of fun. And then from there, I took it to an even more extreme, and I partnered up with two other guys that were starting which I think was the first cybersecurity boot camp in the US at the time. Maybe there was one or two other competitors, but that was like really ground floor of it's like, okay, you don't have a team of 100 people plus, it's you and two other people, and we have to wear every single hat.
Right.
And the teaching experience was just amazing and super cool. From there, we began to offer consulting services, and we had these students, and we wanted to get them exposure. So not only were you having opportunities to help people get a job, but it's great that you have an education, but without that real world work experience, it makes it a little bit tougher. So we began offering consulting services, primarily offensive security services, which I think is the big lure for most people outside of the industry to get into cyber. Like, whoa, hacking's super cool, right? But once you peek behind the curtain, there's so much more than that, right? But just the consulting side.
There always is. I mean, it's never as easy as it seems. It's never as glamorous as it seems. So,
well, to that point, something just bothered me when I would come in, do the pen test, and say, "Here's everything that's wrong with your company. See you later." And I'm like. It's like, just like, if I put myself on the customer side, it's like, well, thank you, but what now, right? And oftentimes, if you're working with a smaller company, they likely didn't have the time or the experience or the people to go about and doing all this remediation. So it was like that kind of like touched by God moment of like, no, you need to like not only just tell people what's wrong, but help them get to a better state of maturity. And then eventually that led me to break off and create Nitro.
And you became your own boss.
I did. First year was very hard, as I'm sure you know, but if you can survive
the trough of disappointment, I think that they have that graph when you start. It's like you have the expectations, you're running the high, then you're like, you go down and you get to this point, like about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months in, it's just like, what the heck did I do?
Well, and you're tempted, right, with like, job opportunities that are open, that are out there. But I think if you can make it past the first year, that's the true test of not giving up and believing in yourself and your capabilities, right? And then, the way I would get started too is not only like, you don't always have to find the clients yourself. You want to go out into consulting, but oftentimes bigger firms are looking for talent to subcontract to. So I would leverage some of those opportunities as well. Mm-hmm. And that opens up your network even more and, helps pay the bills.
And then you got to the point of, obviously you were determining about an exit strategy. You were ready to sell the company, and yet you found out that you didn't have to go through the marketing process or anything like that. You had a partner built in that you were working with. So that's worked out well, it seems like.
Yeah, it's, we're 1 month in, but it's been an incredible time so far. I'm super excited, but look, again, I wanted to grow and get bigger, right? Have a bigger impact. And I knew that there's 2 ways to do that. There's the organic route where you can do it yourself, and typically over a longer time horizon, unless you have an amazing technology or something, you can do the hockey stick graph, but typically a lot less common. Or the other way is inorganic growth, right? And there's a lot of, I just saw so many smaller players that were like really, really good. And I'm like, man, if we could just team up together, we could certainly create a much more powerful entity. But I don't know how well that would work. There's a lot of personalities, I think, that would, I'm sure, get in the way. So when I began on the journey of exploring what options were out there, again, really driven behind finding somebody that would believe in the AI vision around cybersecurity. And I was just very fortunate to have this existing partner, and then they were so willing to come together and align in that vision with me.
Well, let's talk about that AI vision around cybersecurity. Usually at this point in time, I start talking about what's the greatest threat for small and mid-sized businesses. But in general, cybersecurity is a major threat, just an umbrella term. But we see an awful lot of AI out there, and I'll put it in air quotes. It's almost like become, in some ways, as much a marketing term as it is a technical term. And it's difficult for some of us within the market to discern between, well, what's kind of like fluffy and what's really helpful for countering the cybersecurity threats. What does AI in the cybersecurity field look like from your vision perspective?
I see 2 sides of it, right? There's the technology side. Every product that we purchase today and use, there's some type of AI component in there, right? Just whether that's looking at unknown threats and making decisions of, this is not a known operation on the system. The user doesn't normally do these type of activities. Therefore, we're going to block it or maybe just fire an alert on it. On the other side, and this is where I'm starting to play more in and want to develop more. I can't talk too much about what Qubika is doing yet, but I promise very soon we will make a big announcement and share more details on it. But at the high level is around the services. Look, security teams are overwhelmed. They don't have enough people. There's way too much data that are out there. So the cognitive load is just increasing massively, right? All the time. So what I see really the benefit of AI is not to replace the analysts on the team. We still need them, but they sort of evolve into this orchestrator role versus the operator of having to slog through, tons of logs and do these investigations. Well, why not just have, an AI analyst that's a part of your team that could, once you get the incident, it can triage the incident for you and essentially create a plan and present the carbon analyst with the plan of, here's how I want to tackle the triage. Do you approve this plan for me to go isolate the endpoint or for me to implement a new rule in the block list, for example? So it's just helping us move faster and allowing the carbon analyst to work on more higher value tasks versus sort of the mundane roles that are important and necessary, but again, take up a lot of time and maybe decrease morale.
So we just had a little bit of a break there because of a drop on my side, but we were just talking about right before the break about carbon analysts, and that triggered in my mind thinking about the old Star Trek movie, the first one, where it was carbon-based life forms that were infestating Enterprise or something like that. So I'm almost thinking it's just like, okay, so we're going to have carbon versus silicon life forms now competing, or analysts, or I guess they're going to work together, I guess. So
Yeah, no. I see it as, again, not a replacement, but an augmentation of just adding and basically like having an additional, analyst on your team.
well, I like that because anyone who's been an analyst trying to look through a lot of stuff knows that if they get too embedded into the weeds, then they sometimes lose perspective of what it is they're looking for, and their brain becomes overworked. Brain fog, brain drain. So anytime that we can simplify the manual tasks, or maybe not say simplify, but offload the manual
Exactly.
tasks, so you get to the point of like where you're actually having to make like real decisions, because AI can make decent decisions as well too, but at some point in time you got to have the human element in there to make the call from a risk management perspective, I would assume. Well, interesting stuff. Well, how does this apply to small and mid-sized businesses? What's like one of the biggest threats that you can think of to the SMB market nowadays from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Before we jump there, last point I wanted to throw in
Oh,
was
yeah, sure.
is the specialty, is that it's hard to find someone that's maybe a pen tester or a digital forensics expert, or doing malware analysis. And I think what the future holds is that on our security teams, right, in addition to the carbon analysts, we will have specialist AI agents that do those very specific tasks. And again, that goes back to the role of the orchestrator, so that our carbon analysts, right, our security teams today will move and be orchestrating those different agents to execute different functionalities based on what the task might be. But I had to say that part.
No, I'm glad you did, because obviously, folks aren't going to see this, but we had about maybe not quite a 5-minute drop in between where I didn't have any internet access. And so the flow of the conversation kind of lost my mind. That is a flaw in the carbon analyst or the carbon-based life form. So, all right, well, let's talk about SMBs and information security and cybersecurity threats. Certainly they're becoming more complex, and kind of dovetailing with the initiatives that you're working on. Anything that we can do to discover those threats. Everything is complicated. I mean, we have
Yes.
I was thinking in my house, for example, it would have been ridiculous for me to think about this in the 90s of having like 50 connected internet devices. I mean, just that alone blows my mind. Usually it was one, it was connected to a modem, and it took you a half hour to connect anywhere. So, but now we've got everything. And of course, all of those have particular potential vulnerabilities. And small and mid-sized businesses, they face the same thing. They're trying to do business, and they don't have the money and the resources sometimes for combating some of these threats. So what, in your perspective, what are some of the most significant threat or threats to SMBs today in that space?
So obviously there's phishing. Everyone knows what that is. I'm not going to give, I won't spend too much time talking about that. But what I will say is why is phishing still the most or one of the most prominent factors is that it's just that the baseline security measures that come out of the box are advancing, even for the SMBs. But also, if you think about the SMBs, right, they are primarily transferring that cybersecurity risk to the SaaS providers, right? Everybody uses tons of SaaS technologies today, different providers that are out there. And oftentimes those providers have, larger security teams, more advanced capabilities, SOC 2 reports, yada, yada. So with that, though, rather than try and attack from those angles, right, the attackers are just, again, very opportunistic. And rather than go for those fortified defenses, they'll just always prefer to ask somebody to let them in the front door. That's the phishing piece.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was poor access management practices. So this could be everything from a lack of MFA, no SSO, having nothing around privileged access management, having a spreadsheet that's centralized with all of the passwords unencrypted, and the other one would be too many people with admin privileges that are standing.
Well, I hesitate to try to understand why do we have the problem still of like people putting their passwords in spreadsheets, for example. I understand that this worked well maybe back in 1998. but we have password managers. We have ways to generate like complex passwords with like ridiculous number of characters that we don't even need to remember. Um, we have better ways to hide our yellow sticky notes under our keyboard. So there are all these different ways that we could. I'm only kidding about the third one, but it sounds to me that there might be like a culture and adoption problem. Why do you think that's the businesses in general, and particularly SMBs? Why haven't they adopted to some of the tools that are out there now? I mean, that's, if I was to TLDR it, I would say we didn't have the technology back then. We have the technology now. Why aren't we using it to help secure these passwords?
I think some of it's an education problem, of course, right? You don't know what you don't know. And then other times it's that it won't happen to us fallacy, which I think is very prominent in sometimes larger companies, but for the most part, small business, it's like, I don't have to worry about security. It's not going to happen to me. But I'll go back to my point earlier that most of the attacks are opportunistic, right? It's just people checking doorknobs and, hey, this one's open. Let's go inside, and see what we can find.
Yeah, and the idea of like it won't happen to me, I kind of was thinking about this with the podcast when we were down for a bit, because this is my 204th conversation, I think, and I've had like a little glitch here and there, but I've never had it drop like that ever. And as I mentioned when we were respooling up, there was an accident near my office a couple of days ago that took down the internet and power for this office building for I think the better part of a day. Unfortunately, it also resulted in a fatality. So I mean, that kind of puts things in perspective. But you don't know sometimes some of the threats out there, and you should try to be as resilient as possible, whether it be like protecting your passwords or protecting your business in general. Now, I'm wondering though, if you were to give one piece of advice to small and mid-sized businesses, just in general, like if there's one thing that they could do to help with their security posture, what would you say?
So I want to say MFA, but I won't, because that's, I think, a common one that's out there. So instead, my advice will be take a preventative approach, which would mean disable all the functionality you don't need versus having that allow by exception approach. I think the larger companies with more capabilities have, they can do that allow and detect, right, and get more creative. But if you don't have the budget, the team, or the time to be responding to all these different alerts, it's much better to just shut off the functionality or disable it, uninstall the necessary software, right? Take away admin privileges from the user endpoints. But the list goes on and on. Think about what's another one, like firewall rules, right? Like just block certain websites from users even be able to go to those websites in the first place. I think that will just greatly simplify your life, because the smaller businesses need simplification, and the more they allow open, the harder that's going to be. I always like to say that complexity is the enemy of security, right? If you're like in one location, protect this one box, that's easy to do. But if you have, hey, there's boxes in every room of the house, it gets harder. If there's boxes in multiple buildings all across the city, even more complicated, and it just goes on and on from there.
Well, I know that your company was working on leveraging AI to help with the SOC analysts, you say, in that area. Is there something that you could see, though, maybe not necessarily from your firm, but just in general, the AI benefiting smaller firms?
Absolutely. I think it's going to come. It's still early in the process today, but I would say, wait just a little bit longer. There's a lot of POCs and experimentation going on, but on the prod ready side, I think we're not quite there.
Well, I know that from my experience, of course, being an entrepreneur, starting a company, not selling a company, but starting a company, but also being in the field, it can get to be very stressful. And I have since learned that also being a podcast host can be pretty stressful when your internet connection becomes unreliable and you're not sure if it's going to drop again next while you're talking with a very, very, very cool guest. So it's like I have to deal with a lot of stress here. And I encourage people in our field, in all seriousness, to find a way to decompress that's healthy. We tend to put a lot on our shoulders. We have an impossible job out there. We can't secure everything. We can't make everything safe. And those of us who are passionate in the field, and a lot of us are, we take it personally when something gets by, so to speak. And so we build up all the stress in ourselves, and we need to find outlets outside of information security to take care of that stress. Brian, what's one of the things that you do to help manage the stress in the industry, and how you manage stress being an entrepreneur? What's one of the things that you do to do that?
Get outside and take a walk. The whole.
Oh, yes.
Screen, just go outside and look around, enjoy nature.
Oh, I absolutely love to do that myself too. It's I'm looking outside right now. It looks like the rain has stopped, but I will frequently do the same thing. I think that if you get out for like a good 15 minutes, that's all you need. It just kind of clears the mind, clears the air, and you're thinking about things too while you're still working. Or while you're walking. Do you? Is there anything else that you do, or do you do anything when you're walking?
Think.
Oh, very good. Yeah, big fan of walking for sure. Well, Brian, what about future plans? What do you have coming down? I know you say that your company is going to have a big announcement soon, and please let me know when that happens, because we'll talk about it at least on the LinkedIn and the podcast pages. But what are some of your future plans coming up?
Future plans is continue to define what AI-driven cybersecurity means and its impact to the industry as a whole, for small businesses too, for large businesses. But yeah, I'm going to be diving in headfirst into this, and really excited about the news to come. So I'm not going to give away too much right now. So again, just let's sync up maybe in a month or two, and I'll have a lot more to share.
That'd be awesome. Be happy to do a special episode to talk about your big announcement. So looking forward to hearing that. And thank you so much for joining us. I know this has been a little bit of a kind of a bumpy ride with the recording, but hopefully we got it all set. A little bit shorter than usual, but I'm looking at the timer, and I have no idea how long this is because the timer was still going when we were down. So, but Brian, seriously, appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom. And I have to admit that AI sometimes to me seems like just this amorphous thing that I can't wrap my brain around. But every time I speak with folks like you, I get a little bit clearer about it. So appreciate that.
Good. I'm glad.
And everybody, stay secure.